a coordinator of the campus writing program, which just means I look at the, the writing intensive courses for undergraduates. I look at the ones that go through education and social sciences and help faculty implement writing into their courses. But I also like to talk about real quick ways of kind of improving our writing, usually in the social sciences, but that kind of thing. So overcoming writer's block. So we first want to figure out why we're here. Now we're a small group, so this is actually a really good thing when we're talking about writer's block. So I would like to hear from all of you. I mean, what are you doing here? Why did you see a poster that said overcoming writer's block and you thought, oh, that'd be cool?
I like to gather tons and tons of material. Oh, I have so much. I will have read it all. I will have thought about it. I have written it in my head. I have outlined it, and nothing is produced.
Okay.
Yeah. But I have tons of material. I mean, it's
That's
there.
great.
I've tagged them. I keep waiting on like this spark, and then happen.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw the advertisement for the writing literature reviews, and I wanted to attend, but I had a conflict. And then this one, I saw the flyer, and I'm kind of like you. I collect everything, have everything in my mind, and then I procrastinate, or I have writer's block, and then everyone says I work better under pressure, because once I get started, I can usually knock something out.
Yeah.
But then it's going back, and I had a 3-page paper that has been a 6-page paper now that I have to cut back, and so I usually get too much, but then with my procrastination, it's hard to go back and cut it because I don't have time anymore. So,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like writer's block, procrastination.
Yeah. How about you?
I think I didn't have a lot of experience in writing, and my writing skill is always not very good, so I think it's good for me to be here.
All right. Good.
Well, I write a lot, and then I have like this super amazing beginning and this super amazing end. But when it comes to the middle, I'm just stuck, and I'm like, there's something that can happen here, but I can't get my mind to go through to figure out how to connect everything together. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna speak.
I hear you. That's great. And all of your experiences, I think it's important to mention, you are not alone. Right? This is all of your complaints. These are extremely common, particularly with graduate students, particularly ones that have gone through like their first year and are now, okay, now I'm starting to write some papers, now I've got a whole buttload of sources and I don't know what to do with them and so on. I hope, and I'm actually quite confident that all of the things that you mentioned, I'll address and will do my best to give you some very pragmatic, very practical steps for you to do. So many times we talk about writer's block in these really weird, vague senses, right? And you kind of leave, at least I leave sessions not really having anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, okay, now I do know I have writer's block and so on. But let me start off with a very, very important caveat, and that's this. I don't believe in writer's block as a confession, so it's kind of, I brought you here perhaps under false pretenses. Writer's block to me is something, it's a term that we throw around and more importantly place on ourselves that can act as that brick wall, right? It can, if metaphors rule our lives and we create our own metaphors, it can be a very dangerous combination. So why do I not believe in writer's block? This is why. A lot of people, when we talk about writing, like I said, we've got metaphors and we do all sorts of things like this. When people think about writing, they think of it like this. Okay, I've got some ideas and I've collected some stuff, and then I've got, like you, I've got tons and tons of data or tons and tons of articles, and then okay, now I'm gonna write. And this is the typical thing that, I mean, it's an intuitive understanding of writing. But this is completely inaccurate. This is not how writers write. And this, I think, is what causes writer's block. The real line, if we can even attribute some sort of linear progression to the writing process, it looks more like this. It's messy. Right? We've got okay, we've got this awesome idea. Maybe I've got tons of ideas for what I think might be awesome research projects. Now, if I'm not careful, I automatically think, oh, well, I'm going to go start writing on them. No. First, obviously, I have to brainstorm. Now, no, brainstorm even before researching. I am just playing. Imagine this being your playground. I'm playing through the process, trying to figure out, all right, what might I want to talk about? And I'll show you some examples of this. Only after that, then do we actually start researching, and then through our research, if in our strategies of literature reviews, we talked about bringing about themes, allowing themes in the research to kind of come at us. We can start to create outlines, partial outlines, figuring out what we want to do, and then we get into not the writing process, but what we might call the drafting process. These are the attempts, sometimes false starts, sometimes they're brilliant, sometimes you do it at 8 a.m., sometimes you do it at 3 a.m., sometimes it's terrible, most of the time it's terrible, every once in a while you'll get something nice, and then you revise it, and then you do it again, and then you revise it. Note how I don't have a finishing line here, because it's a very dangerous assumption when you start talking about the writing process. So we're going to talk about pretty much all of these, and how that might affect writer's block. So to try and summarize all of this, therefore, writer's block is merely the skipping of steps in the writing process, resulting in an inability to proceed. In other words, when you think writer's block, I don't want you to, or I would encourage you not to place this label on yourself, I am blocked, I have writer's block. No. You're simply trying to skip too many steps. So when you have that blinking cursor laughing at you on your screen, and it's like that blinking cursor is mocking you, come on, write something brilliant. You are not blocked. You're simply trying to play your end game before you even started. Right? You're not blocked, so there is no block. You're just skipping too many steps. You are impatient with yourself. Right? So I have
the perfect word in my head before I put it down. I want the perfect sentence. So
right, and we'll get that, and that's so common. And I write all the time. I'm the coordinator of the writing program, and so on. I fall into this every single time. So I'm not coming at you as an authority. I'm coming at you as a fellow writer. So it is the equivalent. I have a 1-year-old son, and his name is Quinn, and it is the equivalent of him crawling, and then he gets to walking, and then I expect him to skip. Of course he's not going to skip, right? He's just now getting to where he can walk across the room. He's running a little bit, but right? Why would we ever expect the same thing for ourselves? Right? Why would we do that? So my hope here, if you get nothing else out of this thing, is that you stop using the term writer's block in the sense that perhaps you used it when you came in here. You're merely skipping steps. So let's go to that first little bit, right? We're on point A, if you will. Again, I don't like necessarily thinking about it as a linear process, because it's not. But idea creation. All right. This is when we have absolutely no idea. For those are we all grad students in here? Are you a grad student? You're undergrad in creative writing, right? So hopefully by this point, at least in this semester, you've got your big assignment and you're getting through it, right? Come next semester and it's the first day of class, and you're trying to figure out what to do. Free writing can be a very helpful tool. Have we all heard of free writing? Mm-hmm. Great. So we don't need to go through this necessarily, but free writing is the idea of, and this is just my words, letting go of your internal critic, and just write. So it goes back to that blinking cursor metaphor. Say something brilliant. Yes, ma'am.
And one thing that when you're doing that free writing is to just, even when you think you can't write something, you can just write it. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write until it clicks back in. Now, I can do that. I'm still stuck at the perfect word, the perfect sentence, the perfect outline. That's where,
And we'll get there, most definitely. And you're absolutely right. When it comes to free writing, the whole point of free writing is no critic whatsoever. Say whatever it is. I don't know what the heck to talk about, so I write. I don't know what the heck to talk about. And inevitably, eventually, you'll find something to talk about. Now, that's one idea. Another idea is called concept mapping. Some people know of mind mapping, yeah. Now we say this and we teach this perhaps kind of in theory in composition courses, and sometimes by showing you exactly what it might look like, people don't do it. So I want to show you that I actually practice what I'm preaching here. What you're looking at here is something I wrote 2 months ago very quickly in about 15 minutes. And you might see some of this in here. This is a very messy concept map of what I'm talking about right now. Right. The great thing about a concept map is, unlike what we might learn about in grade school where it's, you know, that one central circle and then the things, I would encourage you not to think of it in this way. A concept map instead is far more flexible than that. When I started writing this, and I get to use my laser pointer, and I apologize, I'll try and use it as much as possible. How often do you get a laser in your hand?
You don't, but it's fun.
So when I sat down and thought, okay, the College of Ed wants me to write, or wants me to talk about writer's block, I don't even believe in writer's block. How could I talk about it? So you'll note that the first thing I write, I don't believe in writer's block. But I do believe in a lot of other things, and I might be able to mention things like that. So maybe I'm talking about the process of revision. Here's idea creation right here. Maybe I can, and we'll talk about this later, identify disciplinary writing and so on. But note that there's no process here. I'm just bleh, right? I'm just spitting out onto, in this case, an iPad, just scribbling around, coloring it when I can, and there's much more. I just couldn't fit it on the slide. Much more all around here. Just different ideas. This is a very powerful tool that if we forget, or if we don't attempt, we fall into that very first slide I showed you with that line, thinking that it begins with idea creation and ultimately to writing. No. We want to try and escape from that as much as possible. So concept maps. Now you can do this even more so, and there are many computer programs that you like. Now this is way too big. You can see I've got a whole nother cell thing going on over here. But this is something that's a bit more formal. I used a program called Scapple, S-C-A-P-P-L-E. That's available on the Mac for $12. That allows you to color and so on. This can be helpful when you're working with teams, right? So this was, in this case, was a research project we wanted to do a campus writing program. I had a bunch of ideas, but I needed to present them to a group. I wasn't going to show them something like this, right? So for if you're meeting with your advisor and you only have ideas, things like this, and there are a number of different programs, things like this can be very powerful, right? But the thing remains the same. If you find a program that forces you into a linear process, be wary, right? You want something that's a clean slate. You can draw it all over the place if you want. So concept mapping, very important. Any concept mappers? Do we do this? Kind of, sort of?
Yeah. I have an impossible web. It just gets, I web it out, and then I tape paper together, and then it's unwieldy, but yeah.
Look at you, yeah. I'm getting a real feel for how you go about this. It's good. And it's not a bad thing.
Okay.
The opposite would be the person that has a couple of circles on a page and can't think of anything else.
I have
right?
to. I don't want to get rid of it, but I have to cover it up, and so then I'll
Sure.
add these stuff.
So now, if we've got an idea creation, okay, maybe we've done some concept maps. Some people even separate out from the concept map and start drawing pictures, complete pictures, right? Whatever you do, you've got this now. Then we go on to outlining. Now, a lot of writers, in session will admit that they don't outline. If you are one of these people, especially if you're in graduate school, I would strongly encourage you to reconsider outlining. Now, very important caveat. When I say outlining, I don't mean the Roman numeral outline. Right? Now, that never worked for me because I can never remember which Roman numeral comes first. It's a thing with me. I'm just terrible at it. Right? I mean, well, I'm stealing the term from a guy named Boyce here. Useful outlining. Useful. Whatever that means to you, a useful outlining. When you're trying to get this crazy floating circles that you might have, right, of your ideas, and then you're forcing them into a linear format. That's all I mean. useful outlining. So a linear and a nonlinear method through which a writer organizes his or her thoughts. Now, what does this look like? Well, let's think of it in a specific way. Now, I went over this in our strategies of writing literature reviews, so you'll get kind of a 101 on it. If you're a graduate student, you are probably at this point just drowning in sources, right? You've got a buttload of journal articles, maybe some books, and you don't know what to do with them, right? In a useful outline, it begins with, again, baby stepping into the outline process. What you're seeing here is one version of what's called a review matrix. Think of it as an Excel spreadsheet, okay? So different cells. And there are a number of different ways to do this. When you start drowning in authors, you have to try and categorize them, yeah? The review matrix allows you to do this, and a lot of it depends, I think, on whether or not you're approaching a question quantitatively or qualitatively, okay? This is more of a quantitative bent, and I'll show you a qualitative in a second. We have, I think the average journal article when you're going 20, 30 pages has roughly 40 to 50 sources. It's hard to manage, right? So before we even write prose, before we even start our first draft, we want to identify, okay, I've got one Excel spreadsheet that might have the author, of course the date, but maybe the purpose of that article. If it's quantitative, maybe the variables, maybe the data, and this goes on to conclusion and so on. So we start to be able to have a single spreadsheet that gives you all of this information at a single point in time. Now, if you're in creative writing, or if you are writing about other writers, this is a very, very similar process, right? If you're pulling from a number of different sources, you still have to gather, themes that span the whole, all of the works that you're reviewing. So what does this look like? Here's one source pulled out of an Excel spreadsheet that had many, many sources in it. Again, this is a quantitative view of this. This particular writer chose to use these columns. So notice that they've got the citation here. They've got the purpose of the article. Now, why is this important? Because we read a lot of journal articles. It's very difficult, right? I cringe every time I see somebody that's carrying around all of these journal articles with their notes just kind of on them. How can you possibly make sense of that without having to reread the article at least a little bit? This is a way of making sure that you rarely have to do that. Not never, but you rarely would have to. I don't need to look at this article to know what it's about. I've got my Excel spreadsheet for the purposes of this writing. Now, your writing project is what determines these columns, right? Now, a different way of looking at it, and this is what I do and encourage you if you're a qualitative researcher, is you just flip it. Like I said, we're trying to bring themes, commonalities across works, right? So maybe if you're a qualitative researcher or researcher in general, maybe authors are talking about a similar methodology, or maybe a certain epistemology, or a handful of findings, and they all have their own take on it, right? Each one of those could be identified as a theme. Almost always a theme is a definition, for example. So if you are looking, what's a main concept in ELPA right now?
Evidence-based.
There you go.
Evidence.
You
It's
put
all,
me on the spot, like,
education it's all looking at evidence-based.
Right.
You don't want to do anything that is not proven to be successful with the group you're working with.
Okay, so, and I'm spitballing here, but let us assume that one of the questions, I imagine this is, how does one define evidence-based? What is evidence?
Yes.
Quantitative, qualitative, mixed methodology? Do you believe in qualitative methodologists or quantitative methodology? I can, give me statistics, I can prove anything kind of thing. That is a question, that is a theme that needs to be addressed, and I'm sure a number of different people have addressed it. So, if we took that as a theme for your particular paper, the question, we might write the question of evidence-based practice, evidence-based whatever. And this author says this author says this, and so on, and you'll see all of these different authors' take on one thing. Now, why is this powerful? Because inevitably you have to review others' research, right? And when it's time to write about evidence-based practice and the pros and cons and what other people think in the field, I'm just looking at this column, and I will begin to create my outline.
Yeah, because if we use that, then theme 1 could say that it has to have this components to be defined as evidence-based. And
Right.
theme 2 could look at.
Yeah, I'm saying that in this case, maybe a theme is the proponents of
Okay.
quantitative evidence-based
Okay,
practice,
okay.
right? And then we've got all this and what they say about this. Maybe another theme, if we need to divide it, is the opponents
Yes, okay.
and so on. So that's how it was separated out.
Okay.
Otherwise, it might get a little too unwieldy.
Mhm.
So those are the review matrices. Here's an example. You can see, like I said, the definition. This is for a personal learning environment. The definition was a common theme. And you can see how this writer found that all of these sources tried to define PLE, or personal learning environments. They also note that another one, let's see, is the rationale. Now, rationale for personal learning environments, maybe that changes from author to author, and you can see that, right? So this is how, just imagine if you're writing your dissertation or an extended review or whatever, having a single Excel spreadsheet that has all this information. Would that not be easier
Oh, yes.
than a stack of journal articles, right? And here's an even awesome thing about this. If you set this up, you are now reading with a focus. You're not reading a journal article. You're reading a journal article for X, Y, and Z. You're reading a journal articles to see, do they present a definition? If they do, I need to put it here. Do they present any skills or processes that were required for this thing? Well, I need to put them there. It's focused reading. It's quicker, it's more efficient, you'll learn it better, and so on. Okay, now we're back to, we've got our outlines, or we're starting to figure out what other people have said. Here's an outline that I wrote for a paper on writing a literature review. You'll notice that there are no Roman numerals, right? What I mean here is that cite while you write. So as you're pulling these things, once you've got your review matrix, as you're pulling themes, okay, I need to write about, let's see, one of the themes are in blue here, on process leading up to writing, so it's coincidentally what I'm talking about. I have a row that is on the process of writing or leading up to writing, and I can see the different articles. Now you can see how I would pull from my review matrix and bring in the authors here. So what we're seeing is the shaping of an outline, all right? As I was going through this outline, when I found that there were things, I don't know if inspiration hit and I wanted to write at length with this, you can see that there are bigger paragraphs here where I wrote at length. But sometimes I simply pulled the text right from my review matrix, right? So Garrard 2011 encourages the use of folders, paper trail, and documents folder to keep track. You can note that this is not prose. These are my notes real quickly, right? I'll come back to it later. So citing while you write. So rather than staring at that blank page, we're looking at what's becoming a more linear process, a more linear outline. We are identifying in our review matrix what's there, and we're trying to categorize it in our growing outline. But what you should see is that instead of going from A to B, right, instead of going from A, idea creation, to B, writing, we're now just shaping. I always liken writing to sculpting, right? When you sculpt something, if I'm going to sculpt a face, in the first 5 minutes, what's it going to look like? A big blob of clay, right? Even in the next 3 hours, you might be able to see a face, but I still have to go back into it, right? But I'm not putting pressure on myself because I know that I can't in 30 minutes create a face out of clay, right? Writer's block would be the equivalent of assuming that I could do that. Of course I can. So, now we're into drafting. Now, for those of you here, I think most of you anyway, you've mentioned that this is where you kind of get screwed up, was the focus on that perfect language. Fortunately, I have some good stuff for this. So, on drafting, allow yourself a number of sucky drafts. Right? Drink that in, swallow it, and say it over to yourself, okay? Assume from the beginning, this is your assumption as writers, assume from the beginning that your first drafts will be downright terrible. This is the reality. Your first drafts will suck. I promise you, my first drafts suck. This is a good thing. If you truly swallow this, the pressure should start to lift off, okay? it's going to be crap the first time, the second time, maybe the fifth time you write it. Now, this is not just me talking. This is Lamont. She's a great writer, and she has a wonderful book entitled Shitty First Drafts. I will read this at length. So this is Lamont speaking. I'd write a first draft that was maybe twice as long as it should be, with a self-indulgent and boring beginning, stupefying descriptions, lots of tangential quotes, and no ending to speak. The whole thing would be long and incoherent and hideous. The next day I'd sit down, go through it all with a colored pen, take out everything I possibly could, and then write a second draft. It always turned out fine, sometimes even funny and weird and helpful. I'd go over it one more time and mail it in. This is a heavily published author admitting, entitling her book, Shitty First Drafts, right? So if she's like this, should we not say the same for ourselves? So, allow that shitty first draft. Here's another one. This is fun for more creative writers. In our first draft, what does it probably look like? Well, if we're looking through this, we can see that maybe, I don't know, 40%'s not, maybe some of it's reusable. Maybe we've got random stuff, 15% that's just inconsistent. 5% is completely ridiculous. 10% has nothing to do with anything about what we're writing. 10% also has, again, nothing to do with what we're writing. Unnecessary backstory, maybe if you're in the social sciences, you're writing about articles that have nothing truly to do with what you're talking about. And then 5% gold, yeah. And that's the philosophy we're preaching here. If we go into the assumption that our writing will suck at first, then go ahead, just write. What do you have to lose? You'll come back, because that's drafting, right? That is right. Okay. Now, what are our writing habits? How do you write?
I sit down and I wait, and then I try to knock it all out.
You go,
And I
right?
go, and I sit there for hours, and I want the perfect words before I put it on the paper. And
But now you're going to allow yourself a shitty first draft, a shitty second one, and third and fourth and fifth, right?
Yeah. And I don't sit there. I start it, and then I think, okay, I'll do something else, and I'll come back, and then I don't come back, or I come back, and I'm still maybe add 1 or 2 sentences, but nothing. It's not right. I don't have enough information. And this is where I start gathering more information.
Right. I'll tell you what I do. There are a couple of things. One, know that I never, ever, ever open up a blank page. Ever. So Hemingway said that the scariest thing he'd ever seen was a blank page, blank piece of paper. Right? Because I don't like that cursor that I mentioned. So I focus heavily on outlining. And again, outlining has that bad stigma to it. All I mean is I focus on idea creation and outlining so much that by the time I'm ready to write, I've got so much stuff that is fairly linear in an outline format, like I showed you, that the prose part is not bad, it's not hard. Now, what do? Here's the magic, I think, at least for me. Recall that outline on the literature review thing. I will copy and paste that into a blank page. Then I will enter down a couple, and then so literally I have my cursor blinking, and then just a couple of glances down, I have my entire outline, and I go. And as I go through it, it starts to come out. So I'm never stopping for inspiration. Right? Now, with that being said, I also don't put pressure on myself on first draft. Here are a couple of things that people have found helpful. For me, I liken it to hats. So you have a writer's hat on and a critic's hat on. You can't wear them at the same time. That's weird, right? So I would encourage you to just put your writer hat on. I am a writer. I'm not criticizing anything I'm writing. I'm just going to go. The second you start criticizing yourself, you better tell that critic to shut up, because you got your writer's hat on, right? And I will get through as much as I can. Again, if it's hard, I'm doing it wrong, in my opinion. And I'll just get stuff out. Some people have taken that one step further and will actually put blinders on, quite literally. They will type blind. So that, yes, there'll be a zillion and one typos, but at least they won't be able to go back, right? At least they won't be able to go back and try and fix their mistakes. They've got their writer's hat on. Now, you know that eventually you'll put your critic's hat on and go through your text, right? So I have found that extremely helpful. Now, if you read writers' books, writing books, you will find two overall philosophies. Probably the most common, the one that most people preach, is this one: daily writing. This is what a lot of very successful academics do. They write every single day. They set a specific time, some in the morning, some in the evening, but they set a specific time where they do nothing but write. So for example, on my master's thesis, my wife and I said we would write from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday, every day. And we did, and it worked really well. All of that, along with outlining and so on. So if you do the math, it can be pretty impressive. If you promise yourself that you'll write 250 words per day, that is not, by the way, a full page, right? That's maybe like 60% of a full page. That's 1,250 words per week. That's not bad. It's not bad at all. If some people do 500 words per day, that's 2,500 words a week. Again, not bad. But this is a habit that you have to instill in yourself. Now, most of those writing books really abhor binge writing. This is what most people do, I would say, probably. And that is when you are, usually when binge writing is being referred, it's the idea that you're putting so much pressure on yourself, trying to get it perfect, and so on, right? But that doesn't mean you should throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm actually a big proponent of binge writing as well, because it can be useful in a very idea inspiration kind of thing. If you block off, for example, an entire day, you can get a lot of this work done. However, that being said, is with all of those other things I've mentioned. You're not putting pressure on yourself, you're allowing yourself multiple drafts, you're allowing yourself to outline and so on. Some people work better with this idea, but they can't be, it's counterproductive to put pressure on yourself to do so, right? To try and make it perfect. So when I'm referring to binge writing, I'm not referring to staring at a computer screen and waiting for that perfect sentence, right? I am instead saying, if you want to do it all day, more power to you. Just let go of the pressure. Right? Get out. If you want to be a binge writer, then make your goal to be a shitty first draft. Right? That's your goal. Shitty first drafts are quite easy. Right? You can make fun of yourself later, and you can put your critic hat on. In this case, just keep going. Now, a few other useful methods that I found that I pulled from other sources. Emulate your favorite scholars. And what do I mean by this? We're all, 2 years and then a third year, right? And an undergrad. Favorite scholar? Can you name that person? Person that journal articles were just like, wow, that was awesome. Closest thing? How about a major name in your field?
No, I don't have one.
Okay, it will come. Right? If I were to say that Shanahan and Shanahan were the major writers in the subdiscipline that I write in, then try emulating your favorite scholars. Occasionally you will find a journal article that is well written. Every once in a while.
I know some of the names, but they're not my favorite. Their work, like in special education, husband and wife team of Fuchs and Fuchs, but the problem is they're not my favorite. Sometimes their beginnings are good and sometimes their ends are good, but then they'll do the descriptive writing and you're like, how did you get from here to there?
Okay, yeah. then take what is useful and leave the rest. So if you like how they begin and end their articles, emulate that.
Yeah, because the middle, whenever they're describing whatever experiment they did, it always seems fuzzy to me, and it might be because I don't understand enough.
And that's very, very common, right? If a reader maybe is not comfortable with a certain methodology or whatever, that's extremely common, even among PhD holding professors. Okay. But my point here is simply, if you are having trouble structuring your writing. Anything from the macro level, so how to structure sections of a paper, to the micro level, how to structure your sentences. Pull those favorite journal articles. What did they do? This is a 30-minute thing that you can do. Just take out one of their articles, and instead of focusing on content, focus on their rhetoric. Focus on how they structure their paper, how they structure their sentences. It's amazing how quickly you will start to, whether you want to or not, that you will start to emulate their style. This can be just a useful stepping stone as you find your own writing voice in the scholarly world. Another thing to do is to identify disciplinary patterns. Now that's a fancy way of saying all our disciplines speak different languages. In literacy, which is what my field is in, we have a very specific way of writing, very specific way of speaking. Yes, a lot of it has to do with jargon, terminology, but other times it also has to do with just style, what's expected. So you want to be able to say, this is how people in general in ELPA write. This is how people in special education in general write. This is the kind of style they have. Just identifying that style can be a powerful thing. You start to realize that you're not just reading English, you are reading a version of English. And I'll leave you with these 3 things. These are 3 links. The last 2 are books. The first one is just a link. These can be extremely helpful. First thing I'm showing you is the phrase bank at the University of Manchester. So it is to get this site, it's phrasebank.manchester.ac.uk. If you haven't seen this before, prepare yourself, because it can be very powerful. Now, so what do I mean by academic phrase bank? Just like I said, what's the disciplinary language in your field? Some of it can be generalized. And look what they've done here. So we're in writing introductions. If you want to establish the importance of the topic, here are some formats. Think of these as formulas. One of the most significant current discussions in legal and moral philosophy is X. Maybe X plays an important role in the maintenance of Y. Note how this is simply, fill in the blank. And unfortunately, I would say a lot of academic writing is this form. This is a powerful tool. So similarly, if let's see, I don't like this particular idea in ELPA or in special education. I want to be critical. I'm clicking here. Maybe if I'm wanting to first introduce a question or a theory, one question that needs to be asked, however, is whether blah, right? Maybe if I'm identifying a study's weakness, the main weakness of the study is the failure to address, boom. So you can start to see, I hope, how powerful this kind of thing can be when you are encountering what we used to call writer's block, right? We don't call it that anymore. This is a powerful, powerful tool. I would strongly encourage you, just play around with this. If you're trying to describe methods, if you have issues with, I shouldn't say issues, if you're just a newer scholar and trying to figure out, how do I talk about methods? You can see this.
Yeah.
X was prepared according to the procedure used by, and then another source. We can start to see how powerful this is. Okay, so the phrase bank at Manchester, very powerful. Now, very similar to the phrase bank, but written maybe more for an academic or American academic audience. They Say, I Say. This is a great, great book. This is by Graff and Berkenstein. I'm trying to get this to where you can see it. They Say, I Say. You'll note the reviews. How much is that? 129 reviews at 4.5 stars. Very impressive. Now in Graff and Berkenstein, they do something extremely similar. And I'm just trying to fill this. I'll try and fill this up. You'll see, if I can get to the index here. There we go. It's the same kind of thing. They give you very powerful language, almost always some sort of formulaic style of writing. This is a helpful thing to just keep on. You're tired. Maybe you ran out of coffee, right? And you're just waiting for that little phrase. They're right there. They're right there. And put it in there. You can change it later if you want. You can keep it if you want. So Grafenberg style. Finally, and this is the book I would recommend. If memory serves, it was quite cheap as well. It doesn't look like it's wanting to load. Oh, there we go. By Paul Sylvia. He's actually at KU. How to Write a Lot. A Practical Guide to Productive Academic Writing. Small book. This is the book that got my wife and I through our theses. I wrote my thesis in 4 weeks because of this book. I can summarize it for you very quickly. He will encourage you to write every day, and he will encourage you to create writing groups. That can be very helpful if you're having difficulty getting started. So any questions on what used to be referred to as writer's block?
So what would you call it instead of writer's block?
Skipping steps.
Skipping steps.
The second, for me, and again, I'll come to this and almost think, oh, I'm being blocked. No, I'm not. I'm being impatient with myself. Right? I'm skipping steps because writing can be painful. Right? So I want to get through it, right? But similarly to like building a house, you can't build a foundation and then start building the roof. It doesn't work. If it does, let me know how. We can make lots of money together. But until then, skipping steps won't get us anywhere. Anything else?
I think I like knowing that it's not an either or proposition, that I have to have it all ready. So if I'm doing all these things and increasing how much I'm writing, then I can focus on that I'm going to have a product at the end. I think for me, I was always like, okay, I got to get everything right, and then it's going to be right there, but that I have some room for it not to be.
Yeah. It's great that I love how you phrase that, and it's one of for me, the hardest things about writing is to trust the process. I just recently it was a summer class, and I had to write a very expensive literature review I had about 20 days, which is so bad. But because it was a summer class, that's what you had to do. And I had to very much trust that the process that I'm preaching now and the process that I preach every day, that it actually works. And it did. It did. Yeah. Anything else?
Just using a template of phrases to be built with plagiarism.
That's a great question. I think the answer is absolutely not. You are looking at no more than saying, in other words. These are common phrases in the English language.
Because you remember, it's just to get you started.
Right.
Because it's going to give you a start. It's not going to give you that paragraph. It's not going to give you 3 paragraphs. It's getting you, like if you can put them in strategic places. Because when I saw them, I thought, oh, okay, you can put them in strategic places to get you thinking. And then the plagiarism is a good question, because if you're leaving it like that, you might get yourself in trouble. But you're going to change it. You're going to make it be a part of what you're writing.
But these are not, you're not taking any creative element here. So the idea that saying, therefore, nobody has
a copyright
of the therefore, right? And that's pretty much as far as it goes. So therefore, we might want to look at X. This is not plagiarism. So if you wanted to steal from the rest of that sentence of what somebody else said, then yes. But maybe another way of answering the question is this. I guarantee you that if we looked at a journal article, I could find about 6 of those verbatim. Why? Because they're pieces of a puzzle that everyone uses to make their arguments.
When you're teaching English in high school, you talk about sentence starters. These start you, but they do not write the paper.
Unfortunately. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Great luck with your writing.
Yeah.
I'm sure
this
all
was
of you
good.
did
This
very
was
well.
good. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.